Hello everybody and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History with me, Amanda Hallay. And a little episode I've put together with a somewhat misleading title because this episode concerns my favourite top 10 fashion history eras, so it's very, very, very subjective. And also, some of my favourites are grounded in fashion history, but are still worn today because I'm not just going to focus on the West, and I'm not just going to focus on female fashion either. And the reason I wanted to do this episode is because I couldn't imagine doing anything more fun. And we all need a bit of fun these days, don't we? But the number one question that I get asked when people write in is, Amanda, what are your favourite fashion history eras? You know what? Even my family, even my husband, probably don't know what my favourite fashion history eras are. They know nothing, Jon Snow. I mean, regular viewers will know one of them, I'm sure, but there's quite a few others, and you just might be surprised. Maybe some of my top 10 belong in your top 10 as well. But if one of your own favourite fashion history eras isn't featured in this episode, it doesn't mean that I don't like it. I might love it too, it just didn't make it into my personal top 10. That doesn't mean I hate it. Although I think by now I've probably made my feelings on the 1830s quite clear. But like I always say to my students, whether I'm teaching fashion history or art history, which I sometimes teach, you don't have to like everything, just appreciate everything. In fact, you're not supposed to like everything. As Molière said, to honour all is to honour none. I once quoted this in a faculty council meeting and rendered myself quite obnoxious as a consequence, but hey, I think it's a great quote. So come travel with me through time and space as I share my top 10 favourite fashion history eras with you, in absolutely no order, not even chronological order, because it's more fun to have surprises, right? Although I am going to start with the most ancient of my fave fashion history eras. Let's journey to Bronze Age Crete because I am just crazy about Minoan style. Sinuous, sexy, exotic, esoteric. Minoans were probably the first to offer up the hourglass silhouette as a fashion ideal. I love the multi-layered skirts and decorative aprons and that clashing of colourful textiles. I also love how Minoan ladies threaded pearls through their long, curly, snake-like hair. So elegant. And what about Minoan jewellery and its reliance on buzzing bees, so many golden bees? And get this, I am obsessed with Minoan armour. Look at these helmets, look at the shape of the eye holes. I find this so aesthetically compelling, don't you? Next up, let's jump ahead a few thousand years because one of my all-time favourite fashion history eras is the sumptuous 17th century. I love this stuff. All of that voluptuous taffeta, the puffed sleeves, the sloping shoulders, the forgiving waistlines. I often talk about how fashion of an era responds to an ideal body type, and I think that the 17th century is possibly the only era of fashion history where plump little me would have fit in. When it comes to being Rubenesque, I ain't no Rube. I also love the 17th century for menswear. Those breeches and falling band collars and latchets and capes and baldricks and oh, I just love it all. It brings out the cavalier in me. It brings out my musketeer. The 17th century is definitely one of my faves when it comes to menswear, but my absolute favourite menswear era is the 18th century. I don't think men have ever looked more elegant with their short white wigs and slimline silhouettes. And whether these suits were embroidered in gold or worked in simple cloth, the 18th century man gets my vote for fashion. What next? Well, let's take a trip to West and Central Africa because I have fallen in love with the traditional clothing of West and Central Africa, like here, for example, with the Oleko Iro style of Nigeria, or the Kaba and Slit ensemble of Ghana, styles that triumphed over colonial clothing dictates by use of traditional textiles and, more importantly, the embedded cultural meaning of clothing to arrive at a sartorial representation of cultural identity. And what about those glorious textiles, from the indigo edire of the Yoruba to the kente cloths and so many other textiles and dyeing techniques that make for such a vibrant sartorial landscape that has its roots in the distant past but is still worn today. I first fell in love with all this when I did my episode on Aretha Franklin and saw how often she adopted traditional dress, and so I set out to learn more about this history. It's too huge a subject to adequately do justice to in this episode, as there are so many national and even regional variations that it needs its own episode, and I still have a lot to learn. But purely in terms of fashion, can I just share some of the looks that got me so excited? Look at these beautiful dresses of eyelet fabric with 3/4 length bell sleeves and rolled sash waists from 1960s Nigeria. And I think that my favorite among favorites is probably the Yorubian Ase-Oke ensemble. This 3-piece formal outfit is, to my eyes, about as elegant and queenly as it gets. And the gele, that's the headdress, reminds me rather of the balzo of the Italian Renaissance, which brings me almost too neatly to the next of my top 10 favorite fashion history eras. Yes, I am crazy for the Quattrocento. I love the Quattrocento, the camicia, the gamura, those high waistlines, those 4 sleeves. And I love the richness of the textiles and all the detail, embroidery and laces and slash and puff, and the palette, all that burnt sienna and gold and sage green. I also love those complicated Quattrocento hairdos with the lenza tied around the forehead. Come on, the ladies of the Quattrocento were doing Coachella chic, way avant la lettre. I also love Quattrocento menswear with its doublets and gionia with organ pipe folds and mi-party stockings, and look at those colours. I also love the long flowing page boy hairdos. I'm not a Cinquecento gal at all, but when it comes to the Quattrocento, bring it to mama. What else do I like when it comes to fashion? I have never met an item of clothing from the 1930s that I didn't like seriously. This return to ladylike femininity after the boyish dash of the 1920s has me swooning with its long and slinky silhouette. I love how precise 1930s fashion could be, with so much attention given to tailoring, the neatness of it all, the precision, the daintiness of everything. I love the palette of the 30s, all of those dusty muted tones of purple and teal and lavender and periwinkle. I just love it all, I really do. And who doesn't love the slinky, sexy lames? All of which would look so perfect on today's red carpet, wouldn't they? Just as they looked perfect on the ladies who were lucky enough to wear them during the Great Depression, especially when so many other ladies were wearing seed sack dresses. Yet I just can't stay mad at the 30s for long, a decade that gave us backless. Look at these gowns, no wonder the back was the erogenous zone of the era. I think it was also a great decade for menswear. It was so sharp and so dapper, but with enough snap to keep it snazzy. Let's look at another one of my favorite fashion history eras, although again, this has its roots in fashion history way back to the 15th century, even though it is still being worn today. I love the traditional kebaya of Indonesia, these tapered jackets worn over sarongs. Sometimes they're incredibly ornate with intricate embroidery, but sometimes the kebaya is simple, an affair for everyday living. But of course, I like the fancy ones best, in these bold candy colors with rich embroidery. And although, as I said, the kebaya has been worn in Indonesia since the 15th century, it's still being worn today. And don't these ladies look amazing? Brace yourself for the next one, because you might be surprised, even I am surprised, that I love the hard bustle of the 1880s. I know, right? Those of you who watch the UFH regularly will probably be surprised, because I have never waxed lyrical about anything from the 19th century. But I really do love this silhouette. First of all, I love it because it's so incredibly weird, yet I find it infinitely elegant, that large and swaying back view with a gathered front. I think it is extraordinary. I think it's infinitely flattering, and I just love it. Who knew? And when you see the hard bustle on real women, I think it's so pretty, don't you? And in my opinion, far more sexy than the hoop skirt. I also love how many 3/4 length sleeves and square necklines you find in fashion from the 1880s, because I love both of those things. And look at this painting, which is, of course, the Bar at the Folies Bergère by Manet, and you can make out the lady's bustle in the mirror behind her. Listen, I know the 1880s isn't for everyone, but just indulge me. Look at this dress by Charles Frederick Worth, 1888. It looks like something Vivienne Westwood would do today, doesn't it? Well, now that you've recovered from the shock that I like the 1880s, the next thing won't surprise you at all. Because all of you who watch the UFH or are part of the Facebook group will know that I love the mid-century. I love the 50s and early 60s above all things, and of course I love the feminine formality of the mid-1950s, but I am even more in love with the late 1950s and early 1960s. The trapeze silhouette, and I particularly adore evening wear of the early 1960s, which was moving away from the overtly feminine feel of the new look into a simpler, more boxy silhouette. But best of all, I love Kennedy-era leisure wear. Hostess gowns in pastels and corals and turquoise and yellow. I love cigarette pants and capris with oversized tops, hopefully with funnel necks. I love colourful prints. I love anything that screams patio party. So obviously, I love that Kennedy-era society lady Palm Beach look, as typified by Lilly Pulitzer shift dresses with headscarves and enormous jet-set sunglasses. Doesn't all of this just want to make you reach for a Sinatra LP and pour yourself a Mai Tai? But there were no Mai Tais in my next fave era of fashion history. And yet I love the Middle Ages, really anything from the 11th to the 15th century, and basically I'm down with it. From hoopolands to hennins, the elegance of clothing seemed to mirror Gothic architecture. And I especially love the blio, which is my fave piece of medieval kit. I also really dig plate armor. I'm not so keen on chainmail, but I still think it's cool. And it was really the Middle Ages that got me into fashion history in the first place. I did my bachelor's degree at the American University of Paris in art history, and I did a minor in medieval studies. And when I was looking at all that medieval stuff, I was mostly fascinated by the clothing and how fashion in the Middle Ages seemed to change depending on factors beyond the world of clothing. And lo and behold, I guess that's where it all started. This idea that fashion is not an island, it's a response. An idea that basically I formed my career around. What else is in my top 10 faves? Let's take a journey to the majestic, awe-inspiring American prairies for my next fave piece of fashion history. Because I have always, and I mean always since I was a tiny little girl, been absolutely in love with female clothing of the Sioux. Out of all of fashion history throughout the world, the Sioux created one of the very, very best garments, at least one of my top 10 favorite garments in the whole of fashion history. This dress, made of hide with fringe and beadwork, it is undoubtedly one of the most spectacular pieces of attire I've ever seen, and it just resonates aesthetically with me so hugely, and its design is so clever and intriguing. Check this out. All of these dresses take the same pattern. It's a basic tee, yet the top of the tee is very wide and the bottom is slender, so that when the dress is worn, the straight neckline and the sleeve creates almost a batwing effect, with the skirt fitting a little more snugly. Add to it the colourful and stylish beadwork, and I gotta tell you, I think this might be my favourite garment in all of fashion history. I think it is indescribably beautiful. Well, if I've been counting correctly, that's my top 10, but can I just give a few honourable mentions? To the Tudors with their elegant obsession with geometry, the dramatic and empowered 1940s, the 70s Deco revival, and the stolas and palas of ancient Rome. I love all this stuff too. Well, that was my top 10 fave fashion history moments, and I would love to hear yours. You can write to me through my website, I'll leave a link in the description, or join our Facebook group to share your favorites. I'll be back very soon on the Ultimate Fashion History, so until then, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, thanks for watching. See you very soon.